a lot of people are like, oh, technology takes away our jobs. And the reality, when you look at that one mill there, is that the reality is that automation and technology preserves jobs because those individual workers can be paid more, the output remains high, and you're able to bring it back to the U.S.
Welcome to Clothing Culture, a fashion industry podcast at the intersection of technology and innovation. I'm Emily Lane.
And I'm Bret Schnitker. We speak with experts and disruptors who are moving the industry forward and discuss solutions to real industry challenges.
Clothing Culture is produced by Stars Design Group, a global design and production house with more than 30 years of experience. Welcome back to another episode of Clothing Culture. We are here once again at the bar, this time talking Made in America. I've been in
There's some thematic song
I've just
you're
really
trying to
been in
create
this
for these
singing mode lately, even though most people don't want to hear me sing. We just had a phenomenal visit in North Carolina where we had the opportunity to tour Parkdale Cotton, C-Clo, a couple innovation centers, C2, all these amazing companies that are doing incredible things in the apparel industry, and there's this whole ecosystem on the rise. Many of these conversations we are going to bring forward in a longer format on our traditional Clothing Culture podcast, at the sofa recording, so look for those soon. But because we had the opportunity to see some of this progress that's happening, it really got the conversation stirring on this growing trend that we're hearing. Everybody's wanting to look at onshoring, nearshoring, made in America. And with that, there's, of course, pros and cons to all these conversations. So we thought we would maybe do a little deeper dive on that.
That sounds great. I think, it is a continual conversation as long as I've been in the business about certain factions thinking that made in America is important. And certainly that's ideal, building fantastic, robust economies in the country that you live, hopefully exporting those internationally. Those are all really huge positives.
Yeah, in theory, it sounds wonderful, right?
Yeah.
I can get my goods faster and support our local economy. I totally understand the motivation behind this goal. Let's look at some of the positives that would spin out of a greater effort in establishing manufacturing here. Obviously, there's local economic growth.
Yeah, job creation for sure. If you're building a case study to say, hey, let's build Made in America, the very first thing certainly is job creation, economic growth. That's going to be, a big conversation. And in the past, apparel business didn't mean lucrative jobs. It was lower paid wages. And so part of a more modern view into this whole job creation and everything, it would have to include higher paid wages. And for all of us that are in the apparel business, we know we are always searching for the last bastion of inexpensive labor because apparel has always been challenged because we've not had the inflationary rises in cost like other categories have. And so, part of that wrinkle for bringing apparel into the U.S. would be that you really have got to concentrate on not only job creation, but higher wage job creation. And within that, I think technology could make a play. And there are certain categories that people are weighing into, like we saw in Carolinas with whole garment knitting and more elevated product that's doing more than just, covering your body. And so as technology weighs into our category, those more trained and skilled laborers that run machinery that actually makes product could be that solution.
So you're also enhancing skill sets
For sure.
within our nation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. Let's talk a little bit about supply chain resilience.
Well, I think everyone wants to be able to deliver a product to a store, get reads on strength of sales, or they never want to see the reads on poor sales, but you get both. But if your risk is low in terms of inventory and you have the ability to react quickly to stronger sales, Everyone wants that,
Yeah,
right?
fill into demand.
Fill
right?
into demand.
Yeah.
And so onshoring and nearshoring certainly provide that. Made in America with technology, with the right process in place, would allow you to react to demand in product.
There's also sustainability benefits.
Based upon a lot of our conversations that we've had even lately, but we've had more than just the one podcast. We've had a lot of conversations about last mile, reducing carbon credits on transportation. To move goods clear across the world into the US, that burns a lot of fuel and that burns a lot of carbon credits, and it certainly takes a long time. So having production close to the area
makes
that
sense.
a customer could buy it reduces certainly carbon footprint.
Yeah. There's also a lot of consumer appeal. I mean, you often talk about how all around the world, one of our greatest exports is our branding
Yes.
capabilities. And
Yeah.
so, Made in America would only further support that, that desire for American product.
And we have to think globally. I think that, just not only the demand that you have in the US, but the demand for exports that you could ship out of the US and drive that business everywhere, right?
Right.
The other conversation in terms of, the environmental conversation that we were talking about before also is that right now, transparency in supply chain, transparency of, tracking minerals and metals and all that stuff is so important. They want to make sure that your source is a good source, et cetera. And when we were just out at Parkdale, what was an amazing conversation was full transparency into the entire supply chain from the bale to the finished product, and then even in terms of the recycling efforts that they have on waste product and how they're utilizing that. We have the ability to do that when we're controlling all aspects of production in the US here. It gets more murky when you move to other countries.
That's true. Yeah. Greater transparency.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. And I do look forward to our conversation. We're going to have a conversation with the CEO of Parkdale Cotton, and that is going to be such a fun conversation because some of the things that they are doing, I have just outright never seen before. It was really incredible what they have developed. As far as, the negative side of things, it's not just as simple as turning it on. We've talked about in sustainability, it's not like you can just flip that switch and now you're fully sustainable.
Yeah.
There's challenges, hurdles to climb and mountains to climb, whatever it is. There's challenges, right? So, obviously, one of your key points you brought up earlier was higher wages.
Yeah.
Well, that tells me...
Translate to higher costs.
Higher costs,
Yeah.
exactly.
And that's always been the conversation stopper when somebody says, I want made in America. I'm like, okay, how do you feel about this MSRP and this margin? And they're like, well, that doesn't sound good.
That's not gonna
my
work.
customer won't pay that and I need to make money. And that has certainly been the challenge for Made in America because you're going to have higher costs. That's the whole conversation that I guess is not being completely addressed in this whole, hey, let's bring everything home. Let's not manufacture overseas. We just don't have the cost, the labor, the laborers that will work on a particular cost that will meet the value, expectations that our consumer has. And so again, when we look at the reality that we're going to have higher production costs, and that's going to translate to higher overall MSRPs. How is that going to affect this business? And so a couple things can help you there. One is products that have more technology. Two, products that last longer, right? If you walk away from the kind of disposable fast fashion world, that's always going to be challenged in the US. But building a robust infrastructure upon better product that's an investment in a wardrobe that lasts longer, people think less about that dollar amount if they see value that will come back to them year after year after year, right? The other thing that's going to help in this case, and again, it's a journey, is the technology and its help in reducing overall costs. The mill that we visited it was massive, and it was doing millions of metric tons a month in terms of yarn manufacturing. And was it 18 workers managed the entire facility?
They have a lot of technology supporting what they're doing.
I don't want to be off on numbers, but I think
right.
it was in that range at any one given time. And I mean, you walk around and these kind of robotic things are moving back and forth, and you had these workers that could manage so many spinning units, and and the movement of bale and the movement of cotton, and I mean, I just got tired walking under one roof. It was like it was a hike, and a lot of people are like, oh, technology takes away our jobs, and the reality when you look at that one mill there is that the reality is that automation and technology preserves jobs because those individual workers can be paid more, the output remains high, and you're able to bring it back to the U.S.
Well, and then there's also a different sector of jobs. There are skills needed that can help interact with the technology, develop the technology, maintain the technology. It's just a different job title.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's still people needed in that sector.
And again, it's a journey. We're not there yet.
Right.
But, Parkdale's managed to figure that out for the mill in the U.S., and it's just an amazing detail. And then as you move down the path in terms of knitting, weaving, cut, make, and trim, technology's got to find its way into those areas.
The fact that you're not importing all of your entire collection for a season, do you think that equates to a cost savings as well? Just, duties and so forth?
That's a loaded question, and it's a difficult one because, again, you're looking at raw material costs, even though you might have a longer lead time and you might have transportation costs. We have limitations in the U.S. One of those things in terms of challenge on this whole business plan for U.S. made is our real challenge, supply chain challenge for raw materials and trims. We kind of abdicated in mass the apparel industry years ago. We have pockets, we have specialty manufacturing in the U.S., but we just don't have as robust of an infrastructure as, let's say, apparel manufacturing nations like China, Vietnam, India do. And so we have a very limited supply of raw materials. I would tell you in the initial stages, we would still have to be importing raw materials from overseas.
Okay. Another limitation that we have in addition to less raw materials and resources are, you talked about it, we abdicated apparel manufacturing decades ago.
Yeah.
Therefore, that workforce that really understands the processes and all of the setting up a production line and the very specific skill sets to sew garments, all of those skill sets aren't here anymore.
Nope. And you go deeper than that. Does anyone want to do it today? Right?
Right.
America is challenged with an entire workforce that doesn't really want to work in many areas.
Yeah.
I'm not saying wholesale, but you do see a different mentality in America than you do see on a wholesale kind of deal in China or India. People just are working harder because they don't have a choice, right? They've got to do that or they're not going to get fed, We've got a lot of support structures in America. We've got generational wealth. We've got, talking people into getting back into the apparel industry and sitting at a sewing machine 8 or 10 hours a day
backwards
could be challenging. Yeah. And when we eliminate a robust immigration policy, we eliminate workers to do that. I mean, there's a lot of studies that, immigrant labor, we wouldn't have almonds in the U.S. if we didn't have a robust immigrant labor. It would be the same challenge we would have, I think, within the U.S. for apparel manufacturing. Even though it presents a higher paid salary if you're importing technology, you're still going to need workers. And the question is will the average U.S. non-immigrant, somebody who's not trying to establish themselves in the U.S., would they sit down at a sewing machine and sew 8 to 10 hours a day? Today, there is not a lot of people in the U.S. that are willing to do that. They want to do something different.
Right. Yeah, and that also makes me think of just general output. A lot of factories overseas, they work long days
They do.
to hit those capacities, and we have a very different expectation about what a workday is
For
in
sure.
the United States.
For
So,
sure. And so
yeah.
those are all things that you have to incorporate into this challenge side of the business plan. And again, technology and automation could
Can
help
help.
along that path.
Yeah. What about infrastructure gaps?
We certainly have, like we talked about on raw materials, there's certainly infrastructure gaps with that. All the things related to manufacturing that product. I would say that, America, when I've seen infrastructure in other countries on the overall in terms of roads and electricity, we have very affordable electricity, unlike other
Okay.
countries. We have very established roads, et cetera, things like that. So I would say that dealing with some of the other countries I've dealt with, those are things that we have as an advantage.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is kind of a recommitment to refreshing our infrastructure.
Yeah, but even
So-
our unrefreshed infrastructure still looks
Still
better
pretty
than
good.
some countries I've been in for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been on some of those
Yes.
little roads that have,
Yeah.
half of it missing. And you're
Yep.
taking these big vehicles and on the side of a mountain,
Yeah,
Can be
and
pretty
and
spooky.
utilities are expensive in those countries. So
Water,
Yeah.
electricity, all those things. Yeah. Lastly, I think we've talked a little bit about it, but pricing, what the consumer sensitivity, like what they think is fair.
that's singularly the biggest challenge that I see is that it's going to take a pretty good marketing job because the consumer, as we just talked about in another episode with de minimis imports and with these large Chinese companies and with fast fashion, they have an expectation about what a garment should cost.
Right.
And that certainly would not be the reality for anything made in America. And so, you're going, again, this is a journey. You're going to take specialty items and specialty classifications with extreme value add, high quality, really leveraging the part that these are investments, right? In America to get Americans to buy that. And then understand the learnings that we would have about countries like made in Italy, right? For years, we knew that if we were going to buy a garment that was made in Italy, we were going to pay more, but it's made
It's
in Italy.
so
It's so
nice.
exclusive. It's
Yeah,
made in Italy.
luxury.
And Italy did a very good job of creating this infrastructure where everything Italian was just better.
They branded
right?
it. They branded Italy.
branded it.
Yeah.
And when you're in Italy, you realize there's a lot of internal challenges within
Yeah.
Italy. But they sat down and said, look, what we do the best. And people always felt like, if I have a made in Italy label, that's the best. When we think about export, there is still, if we don't continue to make mistakes in this direction, but there is still a large amount of people around the world that look to America as that shining beacon of democracy and that we're a melting pot of all cultures. And, we're what different nations hope to grow up to be. And, we're at risk. There's a lot of challenges internally that are putting that at risk. But today, there's still these people that are like Made in America is a great label. And so if we understand and we can market effectively as an export basis, that we're doing very, very nice tech advanced, cool quality goods and we're exporting under Made in America label, then I would tell you that our export business could be much stronger than our domestic business if we think globally. We always talk about, talk to clients, small and
Right.
big, that always think globally. Today, we're in a global economy. We're not just in an American economy. And so I think if we focus on exports as a worldwide value, then I think we have a much better chance at seeing success.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, last question. In your estimation, having been to many countries who have evolved through the various layers of manufacturing. You always talk about
Agrarian to industrialization.
Yes. Okay, so we would be coming back to manufacturing in this sector. How many years do you think it will take in order to regain that infrastructure, skill set, productivity, this part of the business? How many years before we could see real volume?
Yeah. Again, an interesting question because technology has a way of changing that dynamic pretty quickly as people are investing in innovation in our sector. But I would tell you that it would be, for us to really see something noticeable, it would be 10 years.
Okay.
I would say that we could make some significant moves in a good direction over 5, but it would need to be a very large wholesale effort in all aspects, and we might start to see a nice change over 10 years.
Okay, great. So let's see. This is long before your retirement. You're going to get a chance to be a part of that.
I'll know whether I was right or wrong, right? For sure.
We'll circle back in 10 years.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Do not forget to subscribe and stay apprised of upcoming episodes of Clothing Culture. And make note, we've got a couple good ones coming up that spun out of this conversation, our conversation with Parkdale Cotton and Ciclo and C2, all of which are made in America. So we look forward to joining you then. Take care.
Thank you.